Once again, we go back to the classics. Hello guys, welcome, or if you've already seen my channel before, welcome back. I am the Philadelphia Whovian, and for this video, yes guys, we're going to be delving into something that has recently crossed my path, or rather, it was delivered into my path, and before I begin this video, I'm going to be telling you a story about that. This Christmas, well, I did my best. I spent months, and I mean months, making Christmas presents for my entire family, only to receive 2 gifts in turn from 2 different people, and that was it. But then something happened. All the way from London, a surprise Christmas present came in the mail from one of my fans who watches my channel, and he never told me. What did he give me? From the 1980s? The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, starring Jeremy Brett as Sherlock Holmes and David Burke as Watson. Brought to film, or brought to at least to television, by John Hawksworth. Correct me if I'm wrong with my pronunciation in the comment section when it came to John's last name, but John Hawksworth. And guys, he gave me, the person who sent me the present, he put other things in the box as well, which I will one day just divulge to you. But for some reason, my instincts were drawn to this immediately. I was like, oh my god! It's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett and David Burke. And guys, long story short, it was awesome. And not just that, but here's the thing. It was so awesome, it inspired me to do a list. But here's the problem with this list. I have not had such a more difficult time contracting a list since I did a video ranking all of the 4th Doctor stories from Doctor Who. I mean, this was like a list that was pure hell to write. And it's only 13 stories, I believe. Is it 13 stories I did? Yes, I believe. Yeah, collection, 13 episode collection. This is 5 volumes, or 6 volumes. Yes, 5 volumes with 13 episodes, and that was hell to rank. That's how good this actually was. And it's also very true to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories. Yeah, so not only is it very good to watch, and it's, I mean, if you're into 1980s television, yes, you'll love it. But if you can't stand 1980s television because you can't stand the older cameras, whatever intelligence you think that is, yes, then maybe, I guess, maybe not for you. But if you love Sherlock Holmes, this is incredible to get. It's incredible to see. All the stories, I've been told, are very close to the original stories, the way that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote. So, yes, we should be starting with the ranking. And guys, I'm telling you now, oh God, I'm telling you now, guys, my list is going to be completely opposite than yours, because I had no choice but to do something at the bottom. It's 13 stories of awesomeness. It's not my fault. Something had to go at the very bottom. What can you do? But either way, this is 13 episodes that are absolutely incredible. So, I wrote them down, so I'm going to read them to you. First we got, as number 13, The Greek Interpreter. The Greek Interpreter thinking, oh my god, how dare you? Mycroft is in that story. It's an incredible story. You're right, it is. The reason I'm putting it at the bottom is because I feel so bad. When I say bad, I mean bad for Mr. Cratites, the Greek man. And if you guys have seen The Greek Interpreter, you understand what I'm talking about. The Greek Interpreter, the plot to that is, a Greek interpreter was summoned in the middle of the night to interpret for a Greek man. He gets there, he finds out this fellow Greek man is clearly being held against his will, is clearly being threatened and tortured. So he goes to, and then she encounters Mycroft, Sherlock Holmes' brother, and it's this episode that we see Mycroft. While I do love this Mycroft, and I'm assuming that he's very close to the way that Mycroft was in the book, I like future renditions of Mycroft because they make Mycroft closer to being Sherlock's age, so it feels like they're more so peers than it is with this, where it feels like Mycroft is very much older than Sherlock Holmes. Very, very different ages. But it does capture all of Mycroft's personality in this. And so Sherlock and Watson, Mycroft calls them, they come, and this is the first time that Watson even heard about Sherlock having a family. Never knew. He thought he was like an orphan guy. And so eventually, Sherlock, with Mycroft and Watson, they all discover where the Greek man is, but it is too late, and it's almost too late for the Greek interpreter. But they find out what it all is. It's something to do with the Greek man's sister. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. That's the thing, guys. I'm not going to spoil anything in case people want to see this. But yes, and the sister, God, I want to strangle her. Okay, that's my number 13. It's just simply, I have a hard time seeing what happened to that poor Greek guy. That's all it is. Number 12, the resident patient. Here's what this is about. Sherlock and Watson get a visit by a young man who's a doctor who was literally hired to set up his profession or his residency in this house, where another man not only financed the entire house but also make sure everything looks great. He literally set this poor doctor up in this house for him to receive his patients, and it turns out the man, this older man who is financing everything, is hiding something. He is definitely afraid of something, and it's eating away at him, and then Sherlock Holmes is called in. Sherlock immediately detects that this older man is hiding something from him, and it causes the man's ultimate demise, and eventually we find out what it was. Won't spoil anything. Great episode. It's wonderful. It's just here because it's 13 excellent episodes. That's all it is. Next we have is number 11. We have a Christmas story, or a story centered around Christmas. The Blue Carbuncle. The Blue Carbuncle is this beautiful, beautiful jewel that's been stolen from a woman's house, and it's about retrieving the jewel. But actually the jewel gets retrieved pretty quickly. Yes, it's not about where's the jewel, the blue, beautiful jewel and gem. No. It's about who stole it, because it got retrieved very quickly and it got retrieved actually because it was inside of a goose, was it a goose? Sorry, I think it was a goose, sorry. I believe it was a dead goose. It was retrieved from a dead goose because somehow it got trapped into the dead goose, and a man bought it for a Christmas present to appease his wife, but then eventually a cop discovered the blue carbuncle inside the goose, and finding out how did the blue carbuncle get into the goose, who was the person who was framed for stealing the blue carbuncle, and eventually just wrapping it all up. And it's a enjoyable story for Christmas. Yes, Sherlock Holmes, this is a good story for Christmas time, and it's the Blue Carbuncle. Yes, good story. Next we have up is number 10, The Norwood Builder. Okay, this is an influential story because I feel like this story was the template for lots of stories to come where it's about misplaced villain. Very soon into the episode, Watson and Holmes get a visitor of a young man who comes rushing in saying, because it turns out he had been, the previous night had been to a home where he wrote the will and testament of a man who left him a large inheritance, but then it turns out he wakes up the next morning in a hotel, reads a newspaper, and discovers, oh, the house has been burnt, and the guy who I did the will for is dead. He burned up in the establishment. And the young man goes to Sherlock and Watson saying, I am innocent, please, and if I know I'm about to be arrested, very soon I'm going to be arrested. I need you on the case, because I know that if you're on the case, I will be verified and I'll be determined innocent because you will find the villain. Ultimately, Sherlock does. And like I said, misplaced villain, or again, placing the villainy on the wrong person intentionally. This is something that you'll see used quite often, of using someone trying to pin the villainy on somebody else intentionally. There you go. So I think it's a great story. It is absolutely wonderful. It's in this story we also meet Lestrade, or Lestrade. Normally he's called Lestrade, but in this show, in this production, he's called Lestrade, which I'm assuming is the correct way of saying it, but who knows. Well, okay, I was perfectly fine with this Lestrade here. I'll be honest, I do like future renditions of Lestrade, or Lestrade, because there's something about those renditions that really make the character their own. Something about this one, he didn't feel like he had enough presence in comparison to Sherlock Holmes, which is probably the way he was written in the book, but I do like the future renditions of Lestrade, or Lestrade. But overall, yes, love this story. Now, number 9, the Naval Treaty. Okay, it's very simple. It starts out with a man in hysterics because he was given an important naval document that he was meant to rewrite, like just basically copy, and he was in his office copying it. Then he went downstairs to get some coffee that was supposed to have come up to him, that it wasn't come up, goes up again, and the Naval Treaty is completely gone. So he's in a complete nervous state. He does not know where the Naval Treaty is, so he employs Sherlock Holmes to find out where the Naval Treaty is. And Sherlock does discover it. It's a good concept of, again, who done it. Very good story. as well. Next we have number 8, the Copper Beaches. Oh God. Sorry guys. Talk about the definition of creepy. Okay, the Copper Beaches is, you have a teacher who comes to Sherlock Holmes. She's a young, beautiful woman with beautiful hair, and she is a teacher, or she is a governess, and she's looking for employment. Well, she goes to an agency that helps employ governesses, and she gets this one guy who, if you've seen this episode, you know the actor. This man, the second he turns around and speaks, you are creeped out. This guy is good at being menacing and terrifying. And he employs her, but at the expense, and he gives her a large sum to employ her. But here are his stipulations. She must cut her hair, and she sometimes has to walk around. Wearing a striking electric blue dress, and she has to sit in a window where he entertains her along with the wife while this is indeed happening. And these are eccentric things, but then she begins to realize there's something very strange going on. Of course there would be. And Sherlock Holmes and Watson come out to investigate. And I love what Sherlock Holmes says here, because Watson's talking about the beautiful landscape of all the farms and the farmland around it, and Sherlock said, I see something else. He's like, okay, if she took this profession up another place, which implies a city, she's like, I would not feel bad for her, but she took this post out in the middle of the country. To me, that's where the real danger is. There's more dangers out in this isolated fields than there is in an alleyway in London. And I've always shared that sentiment because I'm a city girl. The country terrifies me because you're in an area where there's no one around you to hear you scream if something happens to you. So I totally love that. So yes, the Copper Beaches epitomize the idea of the young woman being terrified or terrorized, horrified by these creepy men who are constantly trying to take advantage, constantly trying to take advantage of her. Yes, and that becomes a recurrent theme in these stories. Next up is number 7, A Scandal in Bohemia. The first one in the set. A Scandal in Bohemia, very easy to put through. It's the story of Irene Adler. And it's the only Sherlock Holmes story I've ever read. And it sticks to the story insanely well. Okay, I could say this. Sherlock and Watson, perfectly cast. But this is when it comes to the supporting iconic characters I thought was the perfectly cast was Irene Adler. The actress they got to play her, she was everything I thought Irene Adler was and would be. She was immaculate. But if you know the story of Irene Adler, that's this. The story of Irene Adler is A Scandal in Bohemia. Absolutely wonderful. Now we have is number 6, The Crooked Man. The Crooked Man. Okay, it's a story about how, in the very beginning, we have a husband and wife that heard arguing by their servants, and the servants finally break in, and they find out they see the husband dead and the woman passed out in shock. And it's about finding out how did the man die. And we find out through snippets here and there that he was stationed up at he was in a regiment along with other soldiers, and then we eventually find out that his wife, there was 2 men who were in love with her, him and another guy, but actually she was more in love with the other guy. And what happened, that she did not marry that other guy, but rather she married the man she married, and eventually be in a life where it was not as happy as the man she would have been with initially. I can't say any more because I would really spoil it for you, but oh, that was a very good story as well. Very unique. And I stress this one name that will become very influential to you if you see the episode. Mark the name, David. Alright, now, number 5, we have the second story in the set, The Dancing Men. Alright, a man comes to Sherlock and Watson with a complaint. He has been married to an American woman, and they are happily married, but she never talks about her life in America. Randomly, pictures of dancing men, drawings of dancing men with chalk is seen all around the outside of the house, and they find these dancing men everywhere. And this guy goes to Sherlock Holmes trying to find out what it means. Eventually, Sherlock Holmes finds out it's in code, that the dancing men actually stand for letters, and he begins to translate all of the meanings. But it might have been too late. It is a very unique story. I mean, Doyle, I gotta give him credit for his uniqueness when it comes to these plot lines. Incredible. Now we have as number 4, The Speckled Band. Another story about young women being creeped on. The Speckled Band, a woman comes to Sherlock Holmes because she's about to get married, and she keeps waking up because she hears a whistle. Why? Because her father, or her stepfather, he lives on this isolated estate where he only allows gypsies to come and rest, and he has all these exotic animals around him from his time in India. But here's the thing. He had renovations done on her room at the time before she was going to get married, and he has her stay in another room. It's the same room as where her sister died a few years ago before she was going to get married. And she goes to Sherlock Holmes because she's worried, she's scared that she's in the same room that her sister mysteriously died in. And her suspicions were right, because there is something very much going wrong in that estate. I'll say no more, but woo, it was something. The Speckled Band. Alright, number 3. The Final Problem. That's the last episode of Volume 5. The last episode of this set is The Final Problem. And I'm not going to, I'm afraid to give it away. Oh, I'll give it away. Moriarty. It's about Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. It's an incredible story, but oh my god, the ending devastated me. I had no idea that's how initially The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes ended. I was overwhelmed. I didn't even want to see the episode again because I was just so in shock. But those of you guys who've seen The Final Problem, you know it's a great story. But guys, question. Those who've seen The Final Problem, but you also watch Doctor Who, is this where Douglas Adams got inspiration for the City of Death? Because the plot of this is, it begins with Moriarty trying to sell copies of the Mona Lisa. He stole the Mona Lisa so he could sell fake copies of it to make a killing. So, is this where the City of Death, where Douglas got inspiration from? Let me know. The only problem I have with this is the concept of Moriarty. He probably is exactly the way Moriarty is described in the stories of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur. But I admit I do love future renditions of it, because with this Sherlock Holmes, yes, he had the angry eyes, but here's the thing, he felt so unhinged. I never believed him as this overall arching intellectual mastermind of a criminal villain, because he just feels like a guy who's angry all the time and bitter. He just feels like he's too emotional, too filled with sensibility to be rational and intelligent and insightful. But I could be making generalizations. But I admit the future renditions of Moriarty with like Natalie Dormer as Moriarty, and again other people as Moriarty from the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes and the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes. Those Moriartys, I do like them too, because they had this suavity and this charm to them that showed an intellectual genius that was scary underneath. But this one, he just looks menacing, but he doesn't look like he's this mastermind. But that could be me reading into it way too much. Next we have this, number 2, The Redheaded League. It's kind of like a tie-in to The Final Problem, because this is where Moriarty really does make his stamp. The Redheaded League is a league of men who are recruited because they have red hair, and one man goes, and his job is to simply sit there and copy the encyclopedia. But eventually, one day, he goes back to the place for his job, and boom, it's just closed. And it turns out it was this whole conspiracy. Very clever conspiracy for actually something else, which I cannot divulge because it is again, giveaway. It is a spoiler. But it's a very, very clever story. Number 1. For those of you guys who are in any doubt, of course now you know. Number 1, The Solitary Cyclist. Again, harping on that concept of the young, beautiful woman who is just being hounded and just hurt or creeped out, or people trying to take advantage of her. Solitary Cyclist, it's a woman who, there was a relative of hers passed away in Africa, and she looks after her mother. She's also a governess, a teacher. Being a teacher, she was asked to come in because she had talked about this will. She was confronted about the will of her relative in Africa who had recently passed away. She was hoping they received an inheritance. No. But she was offered a job by one of the men who were there to talk about it. But no, she goes there, and every time when she's driving back and forth on her bicycle to go to the train to go see her mother, she's followed by a solitary cyclist, a man with a beard and spectacles who follows her. It is freaking creepy. And we find out there's a lot more to this than you know. It is absolutely terrifying. It's a phenomenal story. So guys, this is my list, and I absolutely loved doing it. And this, guys, again, I recommend this. If you want to see a Sherlock Holmes stories, this one. Thanks to the person who gave it to me, guys. Have you seen this The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett and David Burke, who do awesome jobs as Sherlock and Watson. Have you not? If you have, what are your favorite stories? And guys, thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys!